therefore the Australian government will side with the United Nations with resolutions about the conflict from the United Nations with international law. What's required? Israel has been free so far to bomb Palestinians, to demolish their homes, to starve them, to deny them the basic freedoms that we in this country take for granted. But the Australian government just sits on its hands and makes out that it's a complex issue, they really can't do very much about it, and they take their lead from Washington. This is pathetic and it's shameful. Australia has an important part to play in the world. It's one of those countries that has historically been close to Israel. It needs to recognise that what Israel is doing is not just a continuing crime, but it is not in the interest of the Israeli people themselves. The actions of the Israeli government are just dooming the region to future wars, war after war after war, endless war. Israel is a nuclear power. It's inevitable that other regimes in the region are not going to live under that threat forever. One day the entire Middle East will probably be nuclear, and then what will happen if a war breaks out? Australia has to take a stand. What needs to happen? In recent times we've seen Israel go into Dubai and assassinate a Hamas official. They used Australian passports. These passports were probably turned over by Australians living in Israel, as is apparently a common occurrence. Turn them over for use of the secret police. What does that do to Australian passport holders' security when they travel? The Australian government has a weak and lukewarm response to that. We've also heard just in the last week that 30 years ago Israel was offering nuclear bombs to the South African apartheid regime. The Israeli government is one that has not hesitated to use violence against its neighbours, to devastate them without any concern for the human cost. It has not hesitated to use siege tactics in Beirut in '82, within the occupied territories, and particularly in Gaza for the last 3 years. This is an irresponsible regime. It's a regime that has nuclear weapons it will not admit to, and nobody will force them to admit that. It was prepared to sell these nuclear weapons to another terrorist regime in the world, and still we get the Australian government sitting back and saying, oh, we have to be careful about this, we condemn all sorts of violence, we need to give this time, Israel shouldn't be pressured. What are they waiting for? This is just the policy of weakness, and it has nothing to do with doing the right thing, with trying to find a solution. The situation we have now has been there for a very, very long time, and all it has gotten every year that they've taken it easy on Israel is worse. This Friday, the 5th of June, will be the 43rd anniversary of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza by Israel in the Six-Day War. The West Bank and Gaza are 22% of Palestine that weren't occupied in 1948. Israel has been there now in June for 40 territories for their own use through settlements, 500,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Ariel Sharon said while he was still Prime Minister, we must hurry and grab every hilltop. Whatever we grab now will stay ours. These aren't people who are looking for a peaceful solution. These aren't people who recognise that they need to share this country. These are people that want all of it, and they want it without the Palestinians, and they will use whatever ruthless means they can to get away with that. There is only one thing which will change the direction of Israel, and that is external pressure. That is why our being here today is important, but our attempts to influence our government are something that's even more important, and they must be ongoing. We must make demands of the government. We must be organised. Friends of Palestine is here. They are active, and they provide an organisational focus for people to try and do things. Unless ordinary people do things, Israel will continue to get away with the sort of things we've been doing. Humanitarian supplies will continue to be blockaded from Gaza because they want to squeeze the life out of Gaza. They want the people there to despair, to give up hope, to leave, but at the very least to turn against the government they democratically elected, the Hamas government. We shouldn't be a party to this. We must make our voices heard. You're not going to do it on a one-by-one basis, but if you get organised, you can. And it needs consistent long-term work to do that, to make the government turn around and take a stance that's in line with international law, in line with human rights, and is right. They should not be abetting Israel. They should not be an accomplice to war crimes and human rights violations. So thank you for being here today, but I urge you, do more.
Then they'll take